Hey, welcome back to the About the Labor podcast here at Vikings Territory.com. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald. And today we're talking the 53-man roster. Obviously, on Saturday, the Vikings were one of the, I think it was 23 teams that actually got their 53-man roster in on time at 3 p.m. Central Time. They have since made a couple of moves. Tramaine Brock coming over from Seattle. That was the big deal that the Vikings made, trading a 7th-round pick. They also brought in Blake Bell, claimed him off of waivers from the San Francisco 49ers. And then finally, Alex Boone was cut. That was kind of out of nowhere, and it cleared a roster spot for someone else. And so we'll get into all of that stuff throughout this show today. We'll start off with the predictions. Drew and I had a little bit of a battle. It came down to the wire, so we'll give you the official results on that. And it sounds like Drew will probably be doing some bragging. And then we'll talk more about the guys that I just mentioned here, Blake Bell. Kyle Sloter is another guy that I think that we'll probably do some have to talk about a little bit, since people are pretty excited about him. So we'll go everything from the new guys to the actual 53-man roster itself, all the way down to the practice squad. I believe it's 8 guys that the Vikings have made, so they still have 2 spots remaining on that practice squad. But we'll jump into all that as the show progresses here. So let's first start with our sponsor note. As always, Black Stack Brewing, brand new brewery smack dab in the middle of Minneapolis and St. Paul, with a wide range of clean and flavorful brews and a massive bright tap room, perfect for intimate settings, all the way to special events. That's Black Stack Brewing, 75 North Pryor, just north of Menards, off of University Avenue. And then shout out to our sponsors over at the Twin Cities Directory. Best way to explore delicious bites and fun-filled nights that Minneapolis and St. Paul have to offer. Check it out at www.twincities.directory. That's www.twincities.directory, helping you discover the real Twin Cities. All right, Drew. So let's start off with the predictions. Obviously, Drew and I, we had the last show we did was our prediction show for the 53-man roster. I actually think we did pretty good. Drew is your champion, though.
Not bad.
As predicted by the Twitterverse, I believe Drew had 60% to 40%.
That's
edge.
right. That's right. The Twitterverse loves me.
Yeah.
They I'm gonna look at the final vote for that, because I think that's noteworthy here.
Well, regardless, while Drew's doing that, Drew got 48 out of 53 correct. That's 90.5%. And if you also consider the fact that the Vikings did go out and get Tramaine Brock after the fact and claim Blake Bell, I thought that was pretty impressive that Drew was able to get 48 right. I got 47. The difference for me is Ryan Quigley versus Taylor Semank. Drew obviously picked Quigley, and that to me is the difference on our board. But still, overall, nice job. Congrats to Drew. Doff my hat to you. I'm not going to take my hat off, but regardless, it's a nice job by you, and you have the floor here for bragging.
Yeah, I mean, that's what the fans spoke beforehand. They predicted correctly. I had 62% of the votes prior to our competition.
I'm disappointed in that. That's like losing to you is one thing. Like, I've lost to you before. That's understandable. But the fact that the listeners thought that you were going to win, and not only did they think you were going to win, they decisively thought you were going to win. I mean, a 60-40 spread, that takes over a company. You know, it's not like this was 50-50. This was an outright victory across the board for you.
Hey, our listeners are smart people, you know? I mean, clearly the results speak for themselves.
That's debatable.
But I mean, I think one of the main things that I'm taking away from it too is you put Caleb Jones in your roster. I stuck with Rodney Adams, and there was some question for a little bit if Rodney would make the roster. I know people were telling me that at first he was not going to, and then there was a quote unquote development that kind of altered things and left him on the roster for the time being, so that made the difference as well. But I mean, yeah, I think the punter difference, which we don't think of punter as being too important of a position sometimes, but it made the difference here. So shout out to the 62% of the listeners that voted on the tweet. Appreciate you all. I love you all, and next time you guys can be sure to have confidence in me when we do a competition like this, because I will pull through and I will not disappoint. So
That's debatable, but regardless, I have to concede defeat here, so Drew has the floor. And if you want to bet on Drew next time, the odds would probably be in his favor coming off of this victory, but I don't advise it. He's never going to beat me again. It's not going to happen. You could put that on record right now. But that's enough talk. That's enough bragging from you, enough crying from me. Let's talk about this Vikings roster. Start with the new guys here, because obviously, we talk so much about the guys that are already in-house. You guys are already very familiar with, even Alex Boone getting cut. You guys were aware of his deficiencies, his weaknesses, the things that we talked about, his rather raw preseason. It wasn't good overall for him, and then he obviously sits out with an injury against Seattle, which Drew and I on the show actually went on record saying that we didn't think that mattered, that he would actually play in that game if his roster spot was in jeopardy. But that we were wrong on, and I think most people were wrong about this. I don't think anyone saw Alex Boone getting cut coming. We'll talk more about that as the show goes on here, but let's start with Tramaine Brock, since we did talk about him 2-3 weeks ago now, when he became an item of interest for the Vikings and ultimately signed with the Seahawks, only to get traded to the Vikings, roughly 2 weeks later for that 7th round pick. First and foremost, what do you think of the trade, Drew? Do you think the Vikings got a good deal here from Seattle, and do you think this was a necessary move?
Yeah, it was definitely necessary. Cornerback depth was huge concern. We talked about it on every show throughout the camp and preseason that addressing that, or at least seeing some improvement, was necessary to kind of have that to believe in this defense to repeat the performance from last season. And Tramaine Brock is he's been playing something like 95% of his snaps outside, but I think they will move him in the slot because
that's a position he's played before too.
Yeah, he's played it before. I think his skill set translates, and I think it's where the Vikings need help the most. So I think he'll slide into that position, that role, and I think Waynes will start outside. But I think Brock's a guy you can trust on the inside there, and giving up just a 7th round pick for that, I think it's completely worth it.
Yeah, I'm completely on board with you. I didn't see many people complaining about this trade. I don't really see a reason to possibly complain here. I know it's Vikings territory. Someone's going to complain about something. Everyone's got a gripe with something that Mike Zimmer or Rick Spielman does, but just overall, I mean, if you look at this objectively speaking, the Vikings had a cornerback issue. That was well known. Mackenzie Alexander has struggled. We expected some struggles from him throughout this season, but he was really a problem during the preseason. And we also talked about before how important that slot cornerback position is in Mike Zimmer's defense. So this was definitely a need to acquire a cornerback in some fashion. Tramaine Brock is an excellent cornerback, at least an above average cornerback. If you don't truly believe in what he offers, you should know and understand that this is at the very least an upgrade. He is a veteran. He's experienced. He knows how to play both outside and in the slot, which we talk about flexibility and versatility all the time. This is another example of that, and another example of Rick Spielman kind of executing on what he talked about so much throughout the preseason. But getting back to what I was saying about how this couldn't possibly be looked at as a bad trade, we talk about 7th round picks as a lottery ticket, right? That's the joke that Drew and I have been running with, and you saw what the Vikings were able to accomplish with their 7th round picks this year. Obviously, you see Stacey Coley make the roster. You see Ifeadi Odenigbo and Elijah Lee getting onto the practice squad, guys that probably are going to be competing for roles in the future as soon as next year, potentially. And Jack Tocho is the only one of those 4 that really has no future in Minnesota as it stands today. He has not been offered a practice squad spot, at least to our knowledge. So 3 for 4, you get 1 immediate contributor. That's not bad. But the point being here is that 7th round picks generally don't pan out that well. The Vikings did a tremendous job scouting their late round talent this year, in my opinion. I don't expect that to be the case every year. So trading a 7th round pick for an established cornerback at a position of need, I feel like that's a tremendous job by the Vikings front office. I don't see any way around that. The 7th round pick has about a 20% hit rate, maybe. I think it's actually lower than that. It's
probably lower than that.
I know it's 40% on day 3 alone, so if you get all the way to the back end of that 7th round, He's probably not going to hit on it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a guarantee from BJ Reidell. Tramaine Brock is going to be a hit relative to a 7th-round pick. He's absolutely going to contribute more than the vast majority of 7th-round picks. So this is a clean-cut win for the Vikings, in my opinion. I don't see any way around it. Seattle had depth at the position. They were happy with Deshaun Shedd and obviously Richard Sherman up at the top. They get an extra pick to, John Schneider's a guy who likes to move picks around as well. So they get some more ammunition for the future, and the Vikings get their cornerback they needed. So I really see this as a huge win for the Vikings.
Yeah, there's no way around that. It does. I think Matthew Collar was the guy who kind of has been, he's spread the news that this is much more about Alexander than it was about Waynes. And, there's people I saw talking about, well, what does it say about Waynes? What does it say about Alexander? And it sounds like the team is, they like how Trey Waynes is playing, although he is giving up those shorter receptions. I feel like those little quick slants, quick hitters. But I think we've talked about on the show how that's okay for a number 2 cornerback. As long as you're not getting beat, not giving up the big play, you'll be okay as a number 2 corner, and that's what Waynes has done. So I think they like that out of Trey Waynes, and from that standpoint, Alexander in the slot hasn't been reliable, so they need to get a guy that is. And Tramaine Brock, I believe, is going to be at least reliable. He might not be Captain Munnerlyn, but I think he's going to be at least reliable and serviceable in Mike Zimmer's defense and allow them to sustain what they built last season.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I just want to point out real quick that it was 2 years ago now, so 2016, when the Vikings took Mackenzie Alexander in the 2nd round. A lot of people were claiming that the Vikings should have taken Von Bell, the safety out of Ohio State, who obviously I believe he ended up in New Orleans. Prolific player in college. It made a lot of sense for the Vikings at the time. But you see how quickly cornerback depth erodes, right? It's a position that fluctuates. It's so difficult to be successful and consistent all the time that even guys like Terrence Newman, who have been great all of their career, you see them have poor preseason performances against guys that are going to be bagging groceries in a couple of weeks here. So I think it's very important just moving forward to acknowledge the fact that cornerback excellence isn't something that's sustained for a very long time. So when you see the Vikings use an early round pick to upgrade at the cornerback position in the future, which I have to believe they'll be doing it as soon as next draft, given that what we know about the depth chart right now, assuming that we don't see any progression from Mackenzie Alexander or, Terrence Newman becomes 24 years old again somehow. I see absolutely no way for the team to not upgrade at cornerback again. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. It popped into my head. This is just a random thought, but I just think that it's really important to understand moving forward how important that cornerback position is and how difficult it is to get a multitude of very talented cornerbacks. I mean, think about it. Seattle and Denver are virtually the only teams that over the past half decade have had more than one elite cornerback on their roster during a single year. So what you're getting from Trey Waynes, basically what I'm ramping up to here, should be considered good enough, even if it is very frustrating at times.
Yeah, I mean, part of it, too, is, when you have an elite shutdown corner on the other side of the field, that's allowing almost nothing, past him. The comparison and the perception is, it's pretty starch sometimes, and when Waynes does get beat like that, it's easy to point the finger at him when in reality it's kind of, comparing a guy like Trey Waynes to Xavier Rhodes is probably not fair, and you can bring up draft position or whatever, but Rhodes has kind of ascended to a position where I don't think many people expect him to be. And I don't think really expected that from Waynes either, even though he was picked at 11, but that's just comparing those two right now. I think it's unfair, and that's why this negative perception of Waynes has kind of emerged, I guess.
Absolutely. So let's move on here to Blake Bell. Tight end from San Francisco 49ers. He's a former 4th-round pick. Fun fact about him, if you don't watch Big 12 football, you're not a fan of the Oklahoma Sooners. I'm not going to be shocked if you're not aware of this, but he was actually a quarterback for 3 years. Made the transition to tight end and still was able to get picked up by San Francisco in the 4th round. I believe it was 2 years ago now. So he's been in the league. He's established. He's been on teams for a couple of years now and ends up getting cut by the 49ers, which little bit strange. 49ers don't exactly have the most stacked roster of all time, and I would personally consider Blake Bell to be a nice project given his size and his athleticism and his ability to dominate in a catching traffic type situation. This is a guy that dominates in the red zone, so when you drop Bucky Hodges, you do pick up a guy with a massive frame and a ton of athleticism. I know he's got a history of concussions. That's something to be concerned about if you're a Vikings fan or just a fan of humanity in general. I mean, it's kind of a worry that one more strike could be the end of his career, and all of a sudden you lose Hodges because of that. If in fact Hodges is claimed by another team and not brought back on the practice squad or whatever the Vikings decide to do with that injury designation. I do like Blake Bell though. I just wanted I want to put that out there because I saw a lot of people were very disappointed in cutting Hodges to bring in a guy that the Vikings hadn't had on their roster beforehand that's basically going to come in and have to learn the playbook by himself. He's got a lot of catching up to do here, but at the same time, I really like this player. I think that he has a lot of talent and a lot of potential, and I think that he can be used situationally immediately for the Vikings. I think you might see him very early on in heavy sets because he can block as well. Very well-rounded tight end, very kind of the exact opposite of Hodges in that regard, in that he can line up in line as a blocker as well. So he gives you that dimension for your offense, which is something that we saw the Vikings retain C.J. Ham as a fullback. Blocking and running the football and running heavy sets, that's important, and it's a staple of what Pat Shurmur is going to be doing in the red zone. Blake Bell will be a big part of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems like the Vikings were struggling to find a role for Bucky Hodges, because it looked like they didn't feel comfortable lining him up in line, and then I didn't see very much of him, lining up as a receiver in camp or preseason. So it just didn't seem like he was going to fit, and that kind of led to, he was on the roster initially because I think they wanted to keep his potential and his what he can eventually be as a receiving threat, but when they saw Blake Bell available, I think they pounced on that, and it was at the expense of Hodges. But Bell, he's a 6'6", 270-pound human being. That's a lot of human being, and like you said, he's almost like a jack of all trades. He could line him up, at fullback. He can act as a lead blocker in jumbo packages, and he does have some receiving ability too. So, I think they were looking for the Kyle Carter, like style of play, that kind of template for a player. I think they just wanted a more experienced, more developed player, and I think that's exactly what they got in Blake Bell.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. So let's talk more about Alex Boone now. That's the move that really stands out in this this specific edition of the Vikings Cut Tracker here. Alex Boone was a guy, as I said earlier, that I don't think anyone really saw as a potential to be cut. The Vikings ate, I believe, $3.5 million of his salary to
3.4.
3.4, okay, to essentially admit a mistake in signing him. It sounds like he was a bit of an issue in the locker room. I read that, I believe I read that on Twitter somewhere. I don't have somewhere to credit that, so I guess it's kind of speculative, but you know what I'm saying. It sounds like the Vikings are admitting a mistake here. They want to move on with Nick Easton. I saw a ton of people were very upset with this, given that Alex Boone was, at the very least, probably the second best lineman last season next to Joe Berger. He has not gotten worse. He's pretty much stayed the same. I thought he actually improved over the course of the season last year. So there is more going on here. We saw that Alex Boone went in there in the Vikings office. Rick Spielman offered him. They said to him, basically, we want to we want to pay you less money for your services. And as a lot of people would have said in the same circumstance, he said no, and the Vikings released him. I think it's a class move by the organization, to be quite honest with you. I saw that a lot of people were just pissed off at the Vikings, but this is a guy that has borderline starting caliber talent. He's probably going to start on whichever team ends up picking him up. And it's a class move by the organization to say, hey, you're not going to start for us, but we still want to see you succeed somewhere else. We're going to let you go. We'll find someone else to back up Nick Easton, who is going to be our guy moving forward.
I really doubt that was the mindset of the organization, though. I mean, I'm sure an organization and a general manager, front office, they're always thinking about how they can make their team better. And I'm sure the first concern, you mentioned the locker room stuff, and if that was indeed the issue, which I think kind of maybe did play a part in this, which again, that's not, we're not in the locker room and we don't know for sure, but I think it could be. We know his personality. It's very, it's loud.
It's something.
So,
yeah.
and that's just, and even looking at like Twitter and stuff, it's clear, it's clear that rubs people the wrong way. They don't even know the guy, so we will never know how it is exactly in the locker room. But speculation says that initially it rubs people the wrong way. So if that was the case, I'm sure if they told him, well, we're going to start with Nick Easton, and if he took that the wrong way, and in the locker room things were already, the chemistry was already going downhill, they don't want that to spiral into something really bad. So they said, all right, you can take a pay cut, or we'll let you go. And he was fine with being let go. So he's on the market now. I don't think he's been picked up yet, but it's interesting because I think did he make a Pro Bowl, or he was very close to making a Pro Bowl?
I think it was 2 years ago. He's never been an All-Pro, but he's been a Pro Bowler for sure. Yeah.
Pro Bowler. Okay, so I think and I mean, obviously the situation last year was very tough, but I think it's kind of remarkable how quickly he has descended from a Pro Bowl caliber player to being regarded as a Pro Bowl player to now off of the roster on a team that is scraping by with offensive linemen now.
Yeah, I mean, let's keep in mind here that Alex Boone was brought in last season as, quote, a big money free agent acquisition. That's kind of the most shocking part out of all of this, is that his contract was set up by Rob Brzezinski, who's known very well for setting up beautiful contracts for the Vikings, team-friendly deals, and he did enough negative during his time in Minnesota to essentially negate the brilliance of Rob Brzezinski, which I think that tells you something right there. I've heard that Alex Boone is a great dude. I'm sure my personality would mesh very well with him because I'm equally as loud, but he just doesn't seem to be a guy that is going to mix in every culture, right? He's not
He's not a uniting personality. Right. I mean, a lot of people will take affection to it, and there'll be some that don't. That's just, I mean, that's the way people are now these days. If you don't like it, you're super offended by it. So
I think Brett Anderson, our guy at Vikings Territory, actually might have said this best about Alex Boone. He said that Alex Boone is the type of guy that you want on your roster when you're winning because he adds to the energy. He pumps you up. I'm the Rhino, that guy. He's a leader when you're winning, but when you're losing a lot. The Vikings lost 8 of their last 13 games, or what was it? Yeah. 10 of their last 13 games last season. That's not the guy that you want trying to fix your problems because he's a vocal presence, but he's not exactly someone that's going to avoid telling someone they suck when they suck, which I imagine probably wasn't a very fun thing along the offensive line for last season. Part of me wonders if TJ Clemmings' confidence took a hit with Alex Boone in Minnesota simply because Clemmings was so poor, and Boone's personality suggests to me that he could very well have kind of pushed the issue there. That's speculation. I'm not blaming Boone for anything. I'm simply thinking out loud. But I think that this is an interesting move. I would have obviously rather had Boone on this roster because I think he's better than Nick Easton. I think most people would probably agree with me in that regard. But we're not in the locker room. We're not in the front office, and Nick Easton has performed very well during the preseason. So the Vikings made an executive decision, and an executive on the Vikings made an executive decision. And we need to live with that and try to understand where they're coming from. And, our speculation isn't always going to be accurate. I mean, I think that kind of goes without saying. But when there's smoke, there's fire. That's kind of how it is, and I think that this situation is a definite example of that.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, firsthand. I mean, if you watched the Vikings Territory Roundtable last week, I specifically made time for myself where I could go in here and say, okay, Alex Boone is at least the second best offensive lineman on this team. This talk of him being benched, let alone being cut, is absurd. He will start the season and he will be just fine at left guard. And so I was very shocked by this news when I was hearing it. And but I would like to kind of go back here. I tweeted something yesterday about the 2016 Vikings starting offensive line and how much it has changed. Because I mean, at each position you have a different guy starting now. It's completely different. 5 new guys. So last season, TJ Clemmings was the starting left tackle for most of the season. Alex Boone, left guard, cut. Joe Berger at center, moved to right guard. Brandon Fusco, cut. Jeremiah Searles replaced at right tackle, and then obviously Matt Khalil and Andre Smith, who were the original starting tackles, both let go without really any effort by the Vikings to bring them back. So,
right.
That's out of them. You have Joe Berger, the only one back, and he's not even at the same position. So that's 7 guys that significantly played most of the snaps last season.
I think it's 4 guys now, 4 offensive linemen that were actually with the team in any capacity last year. Like Rashad Hill, for example, joined the roster, I believe, in week 13 last year.
Berger, Hill, Searles, and Easton.
Yeah, those are your 4.
And then you have Isadora, Elfline, Reef, Remmers,
all these new guys. So that right there, I know this is probably beating a dead horse. I don't think you need to listen to this show to hear this one-liner. But this really speaks to the Vikings' attempt at rebuilding the offensive line, right? How quickly they're trying to progress here. They went out and signed 2 offensive tackles. They went and attacked during the draft. They brought in multiple offensive linemen.
They're admitting they swung and missed badly, the last few years with the offensive line, and we have.
Austin Shepard got cut too.
So,
this is a full rehaul at what has. It's in this NFL, given the amount of 5 and 7 step drops and how important being able to run the ball is when you have the lead in the second half. The offensive line has become as important as any position in the NFL. So quarterback is obviously probably the number 1 spot. I think that no one's really going to disagree with me there. I think that someone attacking the cornerback, so either a defensive end or a pass rushing 3-4 outside linebacker, is probably the second most important position. And then right after that is your left tackle. And I think that you can make an argument at this point that right tackle is right there. I mean, the difference, the fact that teams are moving players around so much along their offensive line now. You see Von Miller, for example, attack right tackles and left tackles. You need to have talent on both sides of the offensive line now. So the Vikings are very committed to, revamping this unit. And, while it might not be pretty, I don't think it's going to be pretty. It might be average at best this year. I think there is something to be said about the commitment for this team to really like you said, admit their mistakes, cut ties with Boone, eat money there. I'm sure Rob Brzezinski, who's not a fan of having to eat any dead money, given that he almost never does that. But the Vikings are admitting their mistakes, and they're getting better. So I think this offensive line is astronomically better than last season. I think that it's going to give – I said this in the last show – I think it's going to give Sam Bradford enough time to operate, and I'm really excited to see what this unit can do. And honestly – I thought Easton played well during the preseason. It seems like the Vikings thought he played even better than I did. So I'm excited to see what he can do as a left guard. Obviously, this is a position that doesn't require a ton of athleticism. It's more about knowing where you need to be, blocking well in zone. The Vikings run a ton of inside and outside zone with Dalvin Cook. He's a guy that can move laterally very well and get to the second level. He's not snapping this year, so his little miscue against Dallas last year when he didn't even get a snap off the ground, that's not an issue anymore. We can see this guy really try to realize his potential this year. It's a huge opportunity for Nick Easton, and honestly, I'm starting to buy into it with him because I was impressed with him this summer.
Yeah, I guess it's not really the time to see the results, We've seen camp, we've seen preseason, he's looked serviceable at the least, I would say. But sometimes that stuff doesn't translate, sometimes it does. So I think the next part now is to see, because it seemed like that Elfline Easton combo, left guard and center, worked pretty well together. So if that chemistry if they can move that into the regular season and continue that success against other teams and in real situations, I think that would obviously be a positive development. And I'm not 100% expecting it, but I don't know. I've just, it's weird because I always thought Alex Boone was better than what I guess the fans kind of have brought on about this negative mantra of him. And I think a lot of it had to do with his he talking a lot and not necessarily backing it up. So I don't know. I'm still not completely on board with the cut, but I guess I understand it with the whole locker room issues. But
yes.
I think now. You have kind of your setup here though for what for the backup plan, I guess, for each position. Rashad Hill's going to take over at either tackle spot in the event of an injury. Then you have, backing up at left guard, I would assume, is Jeremiah Searles.
Danny Isidora, I think. Isidora. Isidora's the right side. Isidora's
right
probably
guard. Yep.
That's
I would
another
assume
thing.
He's the right guard backup.
Yep. Or Elfline could be a guard backup as well. I mean, this is
right.
That's kind of one of the things that I like about this offensive line, right? The flexibility within the interior. All these guys can play every position, right? I mean, except for Isidora, we didn't see him do too much at center, but in general, they could play most of the three positions.
Easton, Elfline, and Berger can all play all three of those spots, which, that's really nice to have. So, and then, I don't think Aviante Collins is going to be an immediate backup, anytime soon. I think he's just. I think they kept him 53. Again for his potential. I think if he can build gain some mass on the lower half, he can be a guard. But I think they're kind of waiting for that to happen. And if it does, then I think he can be a really good guard. But I think that's still a process that's going to take a while. But all in all, the Alex Boone thing really surprising. But it leaves the Vikings somewhat thin at offensive line, and they're really kind of going on a limb here. Right. They're going out on a limb here by trusting Nick Easton to really be a full-time starter for the first time, and they're trusting their depth there with Searles, and they're trusting Isadora, and they're trusting these guys that again are. Searles has been proven, and he proved last year right tackle anyway that he wasn't reliable as a starter. So
right.
It's interesting the way they're going about this, but I do like the complete rehaul, the complete hitting of the reset button, but it's risky giving up a guy like Boone who has proven in the past to be a really, really good player.
Absolutely. It's certainly a risk. I'm not going to deny that, but I am excited to see what this offensive line could do, and the commitment to the rebuild really does excite me. I like teams that can admit their mistakes. The Vikings haven't always been a team that does that. Brad Childress maybe should come to mind here, being a guy that was kind of arrogant with his decision making, and it ultimately actually got him fired.
You could point at Rick Spielman for that same thing too in some instances with his draft picks, the way he's kind of hung on to them and given them every possible chance to make it work. But I think he's doing last couple of years he's been a lot better about that, and admitting when he's been wrong about a player. And that was actually the reason I kept Rodney Adams on my prediction, because I figured he would, despite the kind of underwhelming preseason, I thought he'd keep him, which he did. But turns out he's likely going to be the first guy off if Michael Floyd's brought back. So.
Sounds like it, at least at this point in the season. So, all right, let's talk about the actual 53-man roster now. Now that we've got the big three moves out of the way here, let's talk about the 53 as a whole here. So, starting with the quarterback, quarterback, I think pretty self-explanatory. Both Drew and I nailed both those picks. I think all of you guys probably nailed them as well. Running back position, same deal. We kind of figured that when C.J. Ham was sitting week 4 that he was going to be in there. He's going to make the roster as well, so that's not as much of a shock. Congrats to C.J. Ham. It's a tremendous feat by him to learn a new position over the course of an offseason and come in and do enough to take over that fullback spot. The Vikings, if you remember, didn't even try to bring back Zach Line. So it was C.J. Ham or bust, and he did enough to win that starting job. So, again, I don't think that's too shocking. I think most of us saw that coming, but still, congrats are in order for the hard work that he put in there. The first depth chart that I think we should actually discuss a little bit more in depth here is the wide receiver one. I've been harping on how talented this group has been and how polarizing the discussion has been. Some people liked Caleb Jones a lot. Some people liked Rodney Adams. Obviously, you and I both really like Stacy Coley. Jarius Wright has been on the Vikings Twitter trade block for 3 years. There was a lot of decisions that were going into this. We knew that the three guys up top, Diggs, Thielen, and Treadwell, were all going to make the roster. We knew that Michael Floyd was going to be put on the suspension list and how that was going to affect the roster as well. We didn't know what the back end of the roster was going to look like. So, Drew, what do you think of Jarius Wright, Rodney Adams, Stacy Coley being basically your backup wide receiver trio?
I don't have anything against it. I'm still in favor of trying to trade Jarius Wright, and I believe the Vikings are still doing that. The fact that they just refused to play him hardly at all in preseason kind kind of shows me that they're trying to move him, and obviously you can't trade a guy that gets hurt in a preseason game. So I think they're still trying to, and I think I mean, the thing is with Jarius Wright, and I've said this so many times, but I'm gonna say it again. He's a slot niche receiver. He's not going to win on the outside against big physical corners, but he's savvy, and he's a chain mover from the slot. But the Vikings have Adam Thielen, have Stephon Diggs, you have Stacy Coley, I think, can play in the slot. You have other guys that can play in the slot and do so more effectively while also being able to go outside. So, I mean, there's no room for Jarius Wright, although I think in a system where a slot receiver is needed, I think he can be really effective and kind of that could be a really nice landing spot for him. But I just don't think it works in Minnesota. So I would be all for trading him, and then that would it'd make a lot of room, or it'd make room and make a lot of sense then when Floyd returns.
Yeah, it would certainly help this team. I just said earlier that I think that Aviante Collins is player number 53 on this roster. Jarius Wright probably isn't a guy that would be a healthy scratch in every single game next year, assuming he were to play 16 games. But I am in agreement with you, Drew, here that he's probably the guy that if some player on the Vikings roster is going to be moved, it's going to be Jarius Wright. So I think you could still see some roster manipulation here because of the depth. Obviously, you signed Caleb Jones to your practice squad. If you trade Jarius Wright and you pick up another offensive lineman, you could, for example, waive Aviante Collins, sign him to your practice squad, and bring Caleb Jones back on there to give you 6 receivers again, which personally, I thought Caleb Jones is a 53-man roster guy. I think he deserves to be on someone's 53. So I'm not opposed to that line of thinking or that style of manipulation that the Vikings could elect to address here with kind of their issues at offensive line in combination with their kind of stacked wide receiver and then defensive line depth charts are pretty impressive. So I think Jarius Wright's days in Minnesota are probably numbered, but at the same time, I said the same thing for about 3 years on Marcus Sherrills, and that cockroach has never died. I finally learned from my mistake with him. Maybe it's time that we just give up on Jarius Wright and, he's just admit that he's also kind of a cockroach on this team.
I mean, yeah, but the whole thing about Marcus Sherrills is that he brings something to the table. He's one of the top 5 punt returners in the NFL.
But he can't play cornerback at all.
Right, but he's on the field and contributing on the 5, 6, 7, 8 plays in the game. And Jarius Wright, for how many games last year, was inactive, a healthy scratch. So, and I think his production for the most part can be replaced because you have guys again that can play in the slot. So I don't know. I'm advocating a trade, but if it actually happens, we'll see. But I think what you're going to get is when Michael Floyd does return, it's either going to be a Jarius Wright trade or it's going to be Rodney Adams getting the wave. So, which I think, and Andy Carlson brought up another point too. So when Floyd returns, and assuming that Rodney Adams is the odd man out, you have of your bottom 3 receivers, you have Wright, Floyd, and Coley or Treadwell. You're going to need 2 of those guys to play special teams. So it would mean Coley playing special teams, probably, and then you'd have one of Michael Floyd, Jarius Wright, Laquan Treadwell playing special teams, which is an interesting dynamic there because if Treadwell is actually wide receiver 3, probably shouldn't be playing special teams.
Right.
Michael Floyd playing special teams, I feel like he wouldn't take kindly to that, and Jarius Wright probably wouldn't either. So interesting dynamic there, and we'll see if that plays into anything. But that's obviously a ways down the road. But that's I thought that was interesting that Andy brought that up today. That's
a good point, and that's something to consider here moving forward, and something to keep an eye on as well because that is a tremendous point. I mean, Jarius Wright, it's like the same idea. Asking someone to play special teams after being a veteran and like a starter is like the same idea as asking a veteran to take a pay cut, right? It's just an on-field pay cut.
It's like asking a veteran to take a rookie's shoulder pads and jersey to the locker room after practice or something.
It's something that you can't necessarily get mad about because you're employed by the business, but at the same time,
it's disrespectful.
It's disrespectful, and if you're Alex Boone, you take that disrespect and you tell them to go shove it up their ass. You know what I'm saying? I don't think Jarius Wright is the same type of personality. I don't think that anyone's going to argue with me on that. But at the same time, I mean, if I'm Jarius Wright, I'm starting to get a little frustrated too. I think there's frustration.
Oh, yeah, and that's the thing, too, about this whole thing. He kind of has the right to be frustrated.
Right, yes.
In the first couple years of his career in Minnesota, he was very productive. I remember his rookie season, he was brought out the practice squad to replace Percy Harvin, who, I think he had an injury, and he kept having, he was questionable for like the next 7 weeks and then didn't play any of those games. So Jarius Wright played, and he was very productive in replacement of him. And then 2013 had a pretty solid year, and then the Vikings just brought in, they brought in Adam Thielen, they brought in Stephon Diggs, they brought in these other guys that can do the same thing and then also go outside. And so, I mean, it kind of screwed Jarius Wright's career, but it's the way it is. So.
Yep. All right. So let's move on to the offensive line here. I think that we talked already about, the starting five and, the replacements and stuff. So I think the one conversation that really needs to be had regarding the Vikings' decisions on this part of their depth chart is Aviante Collins. That was
one of the questions we have actually from Twitter. It was from Eli asking about, what's up with Aviante Collins over Willie Beavers.
Yeah, okay, so 2 months ago, I talked about how Aviante Collins probably has a future in the NFL as a guard. So I'm not shocked that he was able to make a 53-man roster, but the fact that he's a backup left tackle for the right tackle, I guess, on the Vikings it's shocking. It's a head scratcher to say the least. I thought Willie Beavers was going to be the guy, Eli. I'm with you there. I think that Beavers actually progressed quite a bit during camp this summer. So I had him on my 53 over Aviante Collins. I mean, it's shocking to me as well. But at the same time, Collins has some talent. It's just the arms aren't long enough. Like, he just can't.
He can't play tackle.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. He just doesn't have the arm length.
You can't make your arms longer, but you can make your lower mass wider and stronger if you really hit the weights. That's the difference here. It's possible to get stronger. Do a bunch of leg presses or whatever you mean. Squats, whatever it would be to get your lower half thicker. Turn into Michael Turner, and then you can't can't take. There's not a workout or something where you can stretch your arms to make them an extra few inches longer. So it just seems like guard is the more realistic position for him.
Which, I mean, I think part of the reason why he hasn't played any guard is because the Vikings need at tackle. I mean, behind Reif and Remmers right now, you've got one guy with experience in Jeremiah Searles, and then you have Rashad Hill, who I think both of us can testify is probably a very solid backup, and we're pretty satisfied with Rashad Hill being kind of the number 3 tackle on this team. But I don't have words to explain why the Vikings would keep Collins. I didn't think he looked good during training camp. We never really talked about him in a positive light. He didn't look good in the preseason. I mean, the most vivid memory I have of Aviante Collins is him getting beat during the 4th game of the preseason.
Was that when Heineke almost died?
Yeah, when he got waxed on the left side for a safety. That's my vivid memory of Aviante Collins. So while I do believe he has talent, I did not see this one coming at all. This is probably was, for me, I don't think, he's probably like player number 60 or 65-ish on this 90-man Vikings roster. I did not see him being a top 53 player.
No, I did not either. Never expected it. I mean, he hasn't established a position. I mean, I don't know why they keep playing him at tackle. It doesn't make any sense. And I think he's listed as the backup right tackle on the depth chart. I still think that would technically go to Rashad Hill, but I don't know. I mean, Eli's asking us for an answer here, and I don't know if we have one. It's because Willie Beavers was. I mean, I think that last game was not great, but
it wasn't as bad as Collins' last game, though.
Right. I mean, Beavers really improved, and I'm actually kind of surprised Spielman cut bait on a 4th-round pick of his just from last season or last year. So I don't know.
Admitting more mistakes. Okay. Here's probably the most rational explanation. I think this is. I think it's a conversation I had with Arif Hassan, but I can't remember who it was specifically. But part of the goal of having a 90-man roster in the first place and bringing in an abundance of different players. I mean, who was that offensive tackle that we saw the Vikings bring in, like Arturo Uzdazi, in the middle of August, and he was cut a couple days later? Part of the reason why the Vikings bring in so many different players, I mean, it's probably roughly about 100 different players that have been in camp with the Vikings since draft time, is to get a formal evaluation. Basically, what they're getting paid for to come out and practice with the team is just to get an evaluation. That's a win for both sides, so that in the future, if you have a problem, you have a guy that has knowledge of your system that you know, and you can give him a call and say, hey, look, we've got an opening. We liked what we saw from you. We didn't think that you were as good as this previous guy. Obviously, you wouldn't say that on the call, but, that's essentially what the words would mean.
Right.
But we have experience with you, and we'd like you to come back and join our practice squad, whatever it is. That was the only explanation for the Mitch Leidner signing, in my opinion, was to get a formal evaluation of another quarterback. So with Collins here, this could be a thing where the Vikings wanted to get a formal evaluation of Collins. They got it, and they believe that their evaluation in terms of potential moving forward, Collins outranks Willie Beavers. And behind Collins, what other option did you have at offensive tackle to be your number 4? It was Beavers or it was Collins. So I think the only answer here is that the Vikings have been evaluating Beavers for 2 years, and they don't like what they saw, so they let him walk. And, they keep Collins, who they probably evaluated in a way that suggested that he has potential moving forward. And I think we've talked about that. He does have potential moving forward.
Oh, he does, but not at tackle.
Not at tackle, yeah. So
Willie Beavers has more potential at right tackle than... he's listed at right tackle on the depth chart. That's why I'm saying that. But I don't think that's actually his position. But maybe it is. But I feel like Beavers, he fills the need at tackle better. I don't know. I don't know.
It boggles my mind as well. So let's just move on here. We didn't talk. I always forget about tight end for whatever reason. That should obviously come after the wide receiver discussion, but I forgot once again. So we talked about Blake Bell a little bit already. Obviously, everyone knows what we have in Rudolph and David Morgan. Kyle Carter gets the cut. So real quick here, Drew. I had Kyle Carter on my 53. You had Kyle Carter on your 53. What do you think of him getting cut? I believe that he was one of the guys. Yes, he was one of the guys the Vikings brought back on their practice squad. So what do you think about the cut and then the eventual signing to the practice squad?
Yeah, like I said earlier about Bell, I think that's the mold of tight end they wanted, was a guy that could, be a capable pass catcher, but also can really block, both, again, in the run game, and then also kind of protect the passer if they need an extra blocker. But, I think he's got potential. I think he will ultimately, he'll end up somewhere making a career in the NFL as, an active roster contributor, not just a practice squad guy. We saw that. He had some really nice flashes too as a receiver, I think, in preseason. So I think he's close in that regard. I think it's just the blocking aspect. He's kind of have to, develop and finesse those skills. But I think I should note this too about Bucky Hodges. His stint in Minnesota is not officially over yet. He was on the injured waived list, or however that works, where
alongside R.J. Shelton and Taylor
waivers.
Heineke as well.
He's on waivers now for the next, I think, 2 days or whatever it is, and then if he clears waivers, he's back on the Vikings IR, and from there he can either sit the whole season out or he can reach a settlement with the Vikings for whatever part of his contract, and then he can become essentially a free agent and sign with whatever team is interested. So it's not officially over yet, but I can't imagine with his concussion that he'll miss the entire season. So I would expect him to wind up somewhere else, but we should add that it's not officially over yet. So
yeah, and in that same light, he could still hypothetically be reach an injury settlement and be signed to the Vikings practice squad as well. So the Bucky Hodges experiment is not necessarily over, but that number 84 is officially up for grabs now that he's not on that 53-man roster. So if the Vikings,
maybe they retire it now.
Hey, maybe. Might not be the worst.
Maybe that comes back. We're going to have that discussion again, huh?
When he gets inducted into the Ring of Honor, might work out pretty well. Just saying. So we're running short on time here, so let's jump into the defensive side of the ball here. For the most part, pretty self-explanatory, I think. I think the big cuts here on defense that are worthy of discussion are Emmanuel Lemur over Edmund Robinson, And then you also saw guys like Sean Bauer obviously did make the 53. I think that we expected that, but that was something that, a little bit shocking, I guess, simply because of his status as an undrafted free agent, whatever it is. We saw enough talent from him. Drew and I knew that he was going to make the 53, but he is on there officially. That happened. So and then the final spot is Anthony Harris and the Vikings keeping a total of 5 safeties. I think those are probably the biggest 3 things, just talking points from the defensive side of the ball. So let's start with Edmund Robinson and Emmanuel Lemur. I just said this on Twitter about 15 minutes ago. I should have known better. It's one of those things where my evaluation, personally, was that Emmanuel Lemur is garbage and Edmund Robinson was not as hot, flaming bag of trash as Lemur. And that he could also do more things, like he could play special teams and stuff like that as well. But at the same time, I mean, Lemur he's becoming one of those guys. Like, we don't get why he's making the team, with the exception of the fact that his history with Zimmer in Cincinnati. I don't know. What do you think of this, Drew? My final kind of take on it is simply, we should have all known better. We should have known that Lemur was going to make this team. It is a little bit shocking to see Robinson get first team reps in OTAs and then early in training camp and then eventually get cut all the way. Your thoughts?
I mean, the thing is, none of them, neither he or Lemur or Gideon, for that matter, I guess he kind of put himself in the conversation, but none of them separated themselves very much for me. So I always kind of gave that advantage to the young guy that can still, has a lot more time and, developing to do. And I thought that was Robinson and Gideon as well. And Lemur, I thought he's kind of reached his peak, but apparently they like him as what I assume is going to be a kind of a depth, backup, serviceable role there, where you can kind of trust him to know the Mike Zimmer system, know what he wants, maybe not be able to physically, perform all the tasks necessary, but he at least has an understanding of Mike Zimmer and the scheme. So that him as a backup, I guess, is probably the safe option for the near future. I just thought they would like to go with the long-term route with the guy that still has the capability of improving and has developing to do in Edmund Robinson.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think we're on the same page there. So let's move over to safety. 5 safeties. Both of us had, on our 53s, we had the Vikings keeping, I think, did you have 5 safeties or did you have 4 as well?
I had 5. Counting Exum, I had 5.
Okay. So, well, regardless, I had 4. Drew had 5. That could be another one of the difference makers in our lists here. I guess what do you think of Anthony Harris? Fighting through. He's a former undrafted free agent as well. Obviously, this is a guy out of Virginia that I think a lot of people, myself included, had about a 5th round grade on him and thought that he probably shouldn't have been an undrafted free agent when he was. But still, another year for Anthony Harris in the Vikings 53. It's pretty impressive in itself. Same could be said for J-Ron Curse, a former 7th round pick, and Anthony Exum, a former 6th round pick. So, really, it's a 1st round pick in Harrison Smith and then a bunch of guys that have just gotten better. That's pretty impressive in itself, honestly. So, what are your thoughts on the Vikings' decisions at safety? Obviously, Jack Tocho can be named there as well, the guy that was brought in as a 7th round pick and not claimed. Waived and then not claimed to the practice squad later. What are your thoughts on what the Vikings decided to do at the back end of their defense?
I mean, this is kind of what I expected. I mean, obviously that's what I picked, but I was a little surprised. I mean, I think Anthony Harris would have been the guy if they were going to keep 4 safeties. He would have been the guy that they would have let go. But they did decide to keep 5, which I believe is a little bit unusual for the Vikings, looking at past years. But I mean, the fact that Exum can play cornerback, and I'm sure he will be at some point asked to, I feel like looking at the cornerback depth chart, I'd be like Exum is probably now the 5th or 6th guy, and Sherrills is probably 7, to be honest. I'm sure Exum is above Sherrills on the cornerback depth chart.
Kind of hope so.
I feel like Exum's emergence as a nickel corner, and in that role kind of elevated him onto this roster.
I would agree with you, yeah.
I mean, it kind of made that safety competition between those guys, Exum, Curse, and Harris, which initially it was just 2 spots for those 3 guys.
Yep.
He kind of created one for himself, Exum did, which was nice to see. So, but I mean, props to my guy Anthony Harris for sticking it out. Exum's emergence kind of scared me at first, but he made it. It's all good.
All right. And then finally here, Vikings decided to go with Ryan Quigley over Taylor Semenk, which, I mean, I'm shocked by that. I thought Taylor Semenk was the better punter. Drew might have hit the nail on the head on the last show here that simply Quigley has been better from a directional standpoint, something that we as observers can't necessarily get a great read on. We've talked about this a ton on the show on how punting is a very difficult position to evaluate without knowing what the coach's thoughts were, what the goal or objective was on a given kick. Seems like, based off of the results here, that Ryan Quigley was actually doing a better job than Semenk was. Kind of blindsides me. What do you think of this final decision here? Obviously, Kai Forbath and beats out Marshall Kane as well. If you have thoughts on that,
right,
feel free to go there as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that kind of gave it away for me, and maybe I actually looked into this too far, or maybe I don't know, but Quigley was the holder for every kick, whether it was Kane, whether it was Forbath in the preseason game. So I noticed that, and I kind of thought that would give Quigley the upper hand, but I'm still puzzled as to why Semenk never held in the first place. On those, maybe. Did he never actually have a chance, or I don't know what the difference. I mean, we'll never know. But
yeah.
That kind of signaled to me that Quigley was the leading candidate at punter, and I mean he was the better directional punter in my opinion. He didn't have the power on his punts that Semenk did, but I thought Quigley generally was hitting punts and where it looked like the punt coverage team was supposed to be, and the ball was usually there. So. I don't know. That's kind of how what I take away from the punter.
I think this is just another example of what we were talking about with Forbath and Kane a couple episodes ago. Just consistency over power. Kane's got the bigger leg, but he's not nearly as consistent as Forbath. That's why I decided to go Forbath. And for my personal reasoning, I think the same could probably be said about Quigley. We saw Semenk.
I'm sure. I bet Blair Walsh and the Lock probably scared him from the whole, power kicking, less consistent, idea. Yeah. They probably want to go in opposite direction after that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a shock to me as well here. So let's finish up the show here with anything left on Twitter. And then, that'll be it for today.
Let's see. We have one more thought from Eli. He was asking about what he thinks for any moves that are yet to be made. So any other cuts or any other trades. I think the one thing I was going to just mention again was Jarius Wright. I think he can still be traded. I think the team is still trying to trade him. But obviously I do know at this point it's 9:44 p.m. The practice squad's not filled yet, but I do know an offensive lineman will also be joining that practice squad. I am not sure who yet of the name, but I do know that an offensive lineman will be joining the practice squad. So that will be announced, I'm sure, by the time most of you listen to this on Monday. If not, there will be an offensive lineman joining the practice squad as well.
There you go. I think that I'll just add a little bit to that because I think that you pretty much hit it on the head here. I think Shamar Stephen and Stephen Weatherly are also candidates to be traded, guys that could potentially be moved in order to upgrade the offensive line or to recoup draft picks. I mean, those are two positions where the Vikings have quite a bit of talent, and obviously you waive a guy like Will Sutton, who's been in camp all year, or most of the summer with the Vikings. You could see the Vikings move a guy like Shamar Stephen and bring back Will Sutton in a blink. So that would be something that would make sense to me.
I will say this. I think Arif pointed this out on the Football Machine show, I think a couple weeks ago, where he mentioned Weatherly as a trade candidate as well. And he said
Patriots.
He said that, the whole Patriots backup quarterback thing, how for years the backup quarterback for the Patriots has always had all this value because they're playing behind such a great quarterback. And the Vikings defensive line is kind of in the same, or could be in the same situation where the defensive line has so much talent, and it seems like that unit's been producing for so long, and these backups suddenly get more value because of who they're behind rather than, what they've actually done on the field. So that could be, again, you mentioned both Stephen and Weatherly, that could be something to watch as well.
Yeah. All right, so on to, do we have any more questions here? Is
one more. It was from Matt P here at Matt P _BU. He's asking, it's more of a statement here. He said, I think the Vikings need to look at adding a veteran offensive lineman and a punter. He is not happy with Quigley as the punter. So he's mentioned John Greco has ties with Shermer, and also Andy Lee is still on the market. So any thoughts on those available free agents?
Andy Lee is interesting simply because I don't like Quigley all that much. I didn't like Simank all that much either, to be, real with you here. I don't see it as a real thing. I think the Vikings are pretty happy with Quigley, to be honest. But I don't know, man. I don't think that. I think this is the time when I think the Vikings went out and got the guy they wanted in Tramaine Brock. I don't really see another free agent being added here. Obviously, don't have much cap room to begin with. So, yeah, I don't really see any free agent upgrades.
I'd like to see Greco because it'd be nice if Collins was not on the 53 and you could move him. But I don't know. I really don't expect it to happen. I think their guy they're going to go get was Brock. I think I agree with that. And I do know at this point that they haven't had much discussions on adding, guys other than bringing in and filling out the practice squad. So if that might change, but I think for now, expect neither Greco or Lee to be on the team and expect Quigley to be your punter and the offensive line that is on the depth chart right now to stay intact.
Yeah, I agree with you there. All right, so that is the end of the 53-man roster show. Thanks, as always, for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, YouTube. Some updates for this week. As I said on the last show, plan, as always, for to get a couple more podcasts out this week, coming out on Wednesday and Friday. We'll do some sort of a analysis show on Wednesday, and then some sort of preview show on Friday to prepare for the Saints. And then also, on top of that, Drew and I will be back on Shindig later on this week. We're thinking Wednesday right now, but we're not 100% to do a live film review show. We'll be breaking down both Vikings and Saints stuff to get you prepared for that. And then finally, we'll have that the pregame show that we've been talking about for about a month now, but we're actually going to do that on Monday night, so look forward to that as well. We're pretty excited about the prospect of that. So once again, thanks for listening, and we will catch you guys later on this week.